Welcome to Open Source Stories. My name is Julia Ferrioli. My pronouns are she, her, and I am sitting in my office in Seattle on a very windy day, so hopefully my internet will not cut out. Um, I am talking to Dawn Wages today. Dawn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, so happy to be here. I am in Philadelphia. It is cloudy but pretty nice out today, so I'm not worried about my internet. So I am I like to call myself a web data and ethical open source engineer. um, that kind of encapsulates my 7 odd years in development and my interest in web and data and my committal to ethics and open source as well. So I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more, but excited to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dawn. Um, So we do like to start with a little bit of an off-topic question. I
Mhm.
hear you have dogs.
I do.
What kind of
Two
dogs do you
beautiful
have?
dogs. Two beautiful dogs. They're both like kind of mutts. They look very much like their breeds, but then a little off. So I have a beagle, and he is as loud and as hungry as you think. And I have a Rottweiler so my beagle's 9 and my Rottweiler is 5, and he is way sweeter than you think. So yeah, they're a pair. They like to get in trouble. They like to bug me. They like to be the center of attention, and they are.
We've Rotties are so sweet. They're
Yes.
such great dogs.
Ugh, yeah.
I have a apparently a Labradoodle, though she doesn't look like one. She's actually made an appearance on Open Source Stories because she barked her head off during a
What
session. So,
oh, what a cutie. Whatever she wanted, did she get it?
um, she probably wanted to go meet a dog that was walking outside, so no,
Yeah.
she did not get
Okay,
it.
okay. I
Yeah.
get it.
Um, so you mentioned being an ethical open source engineer.
Mhm.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what that means to you?
Yeah. I don't I think it's important to put a name on it because I think it brings to light and brings to top of my title what is important to me. But um it's nothing too I don't know, large. There's no boot camp I had to go through beforehand. I just really put ethics first before as I proceed with my career. And all of engineering really touches a lot on open source tools. They're all built on top of each other. So as I choose my stack for my clients when I am consulting, or as I contribute to projects, or as I am choosing a license, which is one of the things that I am more active in the ethical open source license movement. I am putting ethics first and trying to take a more farm to table approach where I'm understanding really who the actors in the community are and what does the repo stand for, and really focusing on that there's no piece of code or there's no activity that is really truly apolitical, and leaning into that movement. And I have made a lot of really great and brilliant friends in that ethical open source community as well, who are doing really awesome things.
Yeah, it's a movement that's definitely resonating with a lot of folks right now.
Cool,
Um,
great.
yeah. I love the term farm to table open source. That's
Right.
fantastic. I feel like there's a painting in the making there.
Yeah, yeah. I think it visualizes it, and it also kind of parallels another movement that it doesn't. You don't have to be militant about it. It's just, can you peel back the layers and look a little bit deeper into what you're using and the ramifications of making one decision over another, which
Mhm.
juggling decisions and looking at opportunity costs is a big thing that engineers do every day. So just giving a little context to it.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, what what do you look for when you're choosing it? Like if you're deciding between two different
Mhm.
open source projects, what signals that one is more in line with your ethical
Mhm.
values than the other? How do you make that
Interesting.
evaluation?
That's really interesting you say that. So I think it well, I'll start by doing the normal approach of looking at whether or not a repo it has a healthy active community. Nothing really different from that, but then I'd like to know who the actors in the community are and who founded the community. But those are natural things that you learn over time, and I there's not quite a checklist or a deep dive. Um, but part of this like ecosystem of an of active and healthy community will come with having a large and diverse contributor list and active commits over a large period of time, seeing security releases and patches on a regular basis, figuring out whether or not there is corporate funding of that project or if they have a dedicated maintainer who is doing that as part of their day job. A lot of these things I think are just normal ways that you can keep a project really healthy, but is also indicative of a community that can communicate with each other and that knows how to write an issue and then squash an issue and maybe focuses more on that discourse. I have a talk about what I look for and just kind of ways to be more aware of your community and the tool that you're using. So, for example, I use Gatsby and Wagtail as in Django, which is so. Let's give some background on what these frameworks are. Gatsby is a static site generator that is actually built off of React. There's a lot of what I call as a Python engineer magic involved, where it
Mhm.
dehydrates and rehydrates into this very performant web app that has all the accoutrement of a progressive web app. But is actually kind of a static site generator under the hood, and you can write in Markdown and other things. So that's one of the tools. I can talk more about really why I love Gatsby, but high level, it would be the emphasis on accessibility, the really healthy community, the fact that Gatsby is a private company, but it really injects and has a symbiotic relationship where they inject a lot of resources into it. So they have this healthy community of like providing resources and then encouraging people to provide resources with some benefit on that as well. And then Wagtail is a Python CMS that is built on top of Django, a Python web framework. And I am on the core team of Wagtail, so I may be a little bit biased, but I also joined the core team because it aligned a lot with my personal missions of having an equitable place for people to communicate. We have a code of conduct that we are very proud of. We abide by the contributor covenant, a product of one of a really great friend of mine, Coraline Imke, who also founded the ethical source movement in 2018. So there's a lot of moving parts to what could make a community really special. I've stumbled upon a couple, and I only tried to impart that knowledge to others so they can have some like key things that they can look to when they're doing their search as well.
Those are great things to call out. I have not heard of Wagtail before, so I'm gonna
Okay,
go check it out after this.
cool.
So it seems like there's a lot of overlap between what you look for in from an ethical perspective and an inclusive perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was getting that correct.
Yes,
Just
yeah, totally.
yeah.
So I could talk a little bit more. So I mentioned Coraline Imke's contributor covenant,
Mhm.
which she made some odd years ago. I can't remember when.
It's been a while.
Yeah, right? So she also, in 2018, started the ethical source license in the wake of the backlash with GitHub and the
Mhm.
relationship with the ICE detention center,
Right.
and then created the Hippocratic license, which in its most simplest form is described as do no harm. And so then from there, she's inspired a number of people, including myself, to create other licenses. And so I'm working on the anti-racist license. And to my knowledge, it is the only ethical anti-racist license that exists. And so we are currently writing our first version of the anti-racist license. And we also have an anti-racist software developer kit that we're coming out with as well, which we're really excited. We're starting in Python. And so the goal, and if anyone listening is also interested in contributing, the goal is to tap into some of that knowledge that already exists out there on how to make and build inclusive software, and then create a package starting with Python, and to communicate with the APIs that already exist, build APIs that can transpose and provide tools from that knowledge. And so we have a very, very rich community of people doing good things in the community to make inclusive systems. And we'd like to keep them all in one place. And because racism is intersectional, we don't limit to specifically and explicitly tools that are that discriminate by race, because of all tools, or excuse me, all discrimination is going to be doubly affected by those intersectionally marginalized. So
Mhm.
we're really, really excited about the direction. We have a good small team of people working on it right now, and we're hoping that we can push some stuff out soon.
Can you give me an example of one of the tools?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So we're all in the building stages, right? So there's not much I can speak on that exists now. But
sure.
I have some like examples out of my pocket, right? So one that's really easy to represent would be um like for forms, right? So forms are commonly just like misused or not created in an inclusive way. So one of the ways would be, and we could make it for different front ends, but it would be like a testing kit for forms, and would create some type of name generator. This is kind of mocked out, but not built yet, but a name generator that can give all sorts of different characters or name lengths to test your form to make sure that it is inclusive.
Mhm.
That's an example. You could also do other demographic information. For example, if you're expecting an international crowd, and you're testing with international addresses, does it work? Another one that I thought was really cool, but I actually don't have access to anyone working on this side, and so excuse me if I'm using some of these words incorrectly, but many people of darker skin tones, I am a Black woman, have issues with cameras and digital cameras and having them adjust to correctly to my skin tone and the light around me. And for those who have figured it out and made it work, share those settings, share those tools. What are they? Can you help us out? So there would be some types of connections or questionnaires or tools that would help connect you and guide you to the right tool for the job, and then what settings are the best for the users.
That's awesome. It'd be like, kind of Lighthouse, but for
Hmm.
racism.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
I've been modeling a lot off of Amazon Software Developer Kit, which I
Mhm.
really like, just because they have so much and so many apps that are kind of sticking into this into Boto 3. And so because my background is in Python, I'm mimicking a lot of Python systems and Python packages that I already have little engineer crushes on.
Oh, I'm gonna steal that phrase, engineer crush.
Yeah.
Um, so what are some of the biggest challenges that you see open
Yeah.
source facing?
Interesting. Okay, so I'll give this one could be a two-parter. So one of the things I just like cringe at is the way that we imagine open source to be this egalitarian, like just utopia, right? And if all we need to do is like smooth out all of the friction and then be hands off, and then geniuses will genius, and we will create genius tools. And I am not. I think the far more pragmatic approach to me um, uh, are things need to be tended to grow in general, and I think that's a good metaphor for open source as well. And no small granular community or larger community is going to need the exact same thing. So it's about being patient and empathetic and communicative to be able to foster these systems for growth. And in that vein, I love this one area of research. Her name is, she's an economist named Lisa Cook. And NPR did an awesome, awesome breakdown on Planet Money about it. But her research is about innovation, and the tools are the things that you need to innovate. And she was looking, so one of her mentors said, well, it needs to be in the legal system and you need to stay out of the way and just make things easy for people. And one of the metrics as a proxy for innovation was patents. And then so she took and questioned the premise. So she took a period of time from the 1870s to the 1940s and used patents as an indicator of health and innovation. And then marked times in history where there were large racist events, and tracked and saw that when times were good and there were no marked racist events at that time, for example, African Americans were making a lot of gains or holding office or owning property, patents increased. But then when there were large racist events, African American patents decreased. And she proved as much through empirical researched evidence, and also had to stand in front of her peers and display and write this evidence as well, and had peer review. And there was also this really interesting approach on how she had to describe these events, and give some things that give some context that some people or like you or I may feel is intuitive, and have to like explain how psychological safety leads to progress and innovation. And I think that is an interesting start. And then I think there's a definitely a place for that in open source as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we maybe use different metrics, commits, and number of contributors, but I think there's definitely a way we could track that same kind of progress and safety in a community.
Absolutely. That's fascinating. I'm going to look up Lisa Cook after this.
Right. So
Yeah.
cool. Very, very cool.
I love when I get recommendations from
Yeah.
these sessions.
And Dr. Lisa Cook.
Dr. Lisa Cook.
My mistake, because
Yes.
she is a PhD.
Well, naturally. I just assumed. When you said economist.
Yeah.
Like, okay, doctor. Yeah. How do you think we can address some of these challenges?
Oh, great. Okay. Ooh. Far be it from me to say that I have all the answers, but there are a couple of things that I've seen people do that look great, and I think we should keep them up and maybe try some tweaks on it. But I like apprenticeship programs. I really enjoy the idea of having bounties on open source projects. I think that to get people in is not for the lack of interest, or just diverse groups of people in is not for the lack of interest, is for the lack of resources. I know that it was hard for me to get into open source because I was busy trying to like live and pay my bills. And when I first started learning, I was really beholden to just how much time I had, and then like the kindness of these Python strangers in my Python users group in my local meetup. So I think having some monetary benefit for people really learning and not being so tied to this cut and dry value, direct line of value provide with like issue squashing. And it also makes sense to me as we're having this open source ecosystem, and it's common that we're clearing out the backlog and the issues for multi-million-dollar organizations, and there should be a this altruistic feedback loop of resources and giving back and forth. So I hope that I worded that well, but yeah, I think that getting new people in and giving them the resources to do so and sustain themselves.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I love the idea of apprenticeship programs. And I think I was just talking about that in a different context. So I'll have to have you back to talk about what the ideal apprenticeship program would look like,
Awesome. Oh, great. I
at
can
some
get a
point.
list of some of my friends and what they're doing, but
Yes.
I've been an apprentice, not in a program, and I know a couple of people who are doing some programs, and I'm excited to chat about what they're doing. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we have time for one last question,
Sure.
which is the nebulous. Any parting thoughts for us today?
Interesting. I would love to go to harken back to our first part of the talk, with the farm to table approach. I kind of thought of that right before we got on the call. I may not be the first person to come up with it, but I implore people to do their due diligence on their tools and their code. I mean, I think one of the more recent events, Neo4j, being a big vulnerability for so many different systems, is just another. I mean, we get these cycles all the time that we realize how fragile open source can be. But even for just like the most practical approach, like figure out what your code is running on, and then invest in tools that help you figure out what code is running on. I mean, it's impossible these days with as large as open source has gotten in the past like several decades, but it's not lost to try on it and to work on that goal, even though it's a behemoth of a task. So I'm excited to try my best at a farm to table approach, and I respect a lot of people who do so as well.
Well, I look forward to seeing this phrase pop up more and more. So thank you for introducing it to us here.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on Open Source Stories and telling us your story.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay.